The wine had gone to my head faster than I expected. Standing in the trendy downtown restaurant, surrounded by my colleagues from Henderson Insurance, I felt more alive than I had in months. The dim lighting cast a warm glow over our table, and Lucas Mann, my boss, was telling another one of his charming stories about closing a difficult client. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. And then she said, I don't trust insurance salesmen, so I told her, good thing I'm not selling. I'm protecting your future. Lucas finished with that confident smile that made my stomach flutter. Everyone laughed, including me. I found myself leaning closer to him, intoxicated by his confidence and charisma. At 41, Lucas had this magnetic presence that drew people in. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, his expensive suit fitted impeccably, and when he looked at me with those piercing blue eyes, I felt like the most important person in the room. Irene, you should have seen your face when Mrs. Patterson called this morning, my colleague Jessica said, pulling me back to the conversation. I thought you were going to throw the phone across the room. Don't remind me, I laughed, taking another sip of my wine. Some people think insurance claims process themselves. That's why we need people like Irene, Lucas said, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. She keeps us all organized and sane. The warmth of his touch lingered, even after he moved his hand away. I felt appreciated, valued in a way I hadn't felt at home in years. Simon never complimented me like this. When was the last time my husband had even noticed when I dressed up or made an effort? Speaking of keeping us sane, Jessica said, checking her phone, it's already 9:30. My husband's probably wondering where I am. Mine too, I said, though without any real concern. Simon knew I had the office party tonight. He'd probably already put Mila to bed and was grading papers or watching one of his boring documentaries. As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone buzzed with a text from Simon. Should I pick you up? It's getting late. I showed the message to Lucas, rolling my eyes. See what I mean? He treats me like I'm 16. Want me to tell him you're in good hands? Lucas asked with a grin that made my heart skip. Actually, he said he'd pick me up. I guess he's on his way. 20 minutes later, I saw Simon walk through the restaurant entrance, looking completely out of place in his wrinkled khakis and polo shirt. At 37, my husband had the appearance of someone who'd given up trying. His brown hair was thinning, his shoulders slightly stooped from years of hunching over student papers, and he moved with the tired gait of a man who'd lost his spark. There's my ride, I announced to the table, but made no move to get up. Simon approached our table awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable in the upscale setting. Hey, Irene, sorry to interrupt. Simon, meet everyone, I said with exaggerated enthusiasm. This is my husband, the high school science teacher. The way I said it made it sound like an apology. I introduced him around the table, noting how Lucas stood and shook his hand with that firm, confident grip that probably made Simon feel even smaller. Nice to meet you all, Simon said quietly. Irene, whenever you're ready. Oh, come on, we're just getting started, I protested, even though the party was clearly winding down. Have a drink with us. I should get home to Mila. Your mom had to leave early. She's fine, she's 9 years old, not 9 months old. The table fell into an uncomfortable silence. I could see Simon's jaw tighten the way it did when he was trying not to argue in public. You know what's funny, I said, the wine making me bolder than usual. I was just telling everyone how different you two are. I gestured between Simon and Lucas. Lucas here knows how to make a woman feel special. He brings flowers, takes us out to nice places, actually listens when we talk. Irene. Simon's voice carried a warning, but I was on a roll, feeling empowered by the attention from my colleagues and the approving nods from Lucas. I'm just saying, some men know how to treat a woman right. Lucas would probably be a much better lover than my boring old husband here. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Jessica's mouth fell open. Two other colleagues suddenly found their drinks very interesting. Lucas shifted uncomfortably, though I caught what looked like a pleased smirk. Simon's face went white, then red. For a moment, I thought he might explode, but instead, he just stood there, processing what I'd said in front of a table full of strangers. "I'll be in the car," he said quietly, his voice barely controlled. As he walked away, I felt a mixture of guilt and defiance. "He's so sensitive," I said to the table, trying to laugh it off. "Can't take a joke." But the party atmosphere was ruined. Within 10 minutes, everyone was making excuses to leave. As I gathered my purse, Lucas leaned close to me. "That was a little harsh, don't you think?" "He needs to hear it," I said, though my confidence was starting to waver. "Maybe it'll motivate him to actually try for once." Lucas walked me to the parking lot where Simon sat in our old Honda, staring straight ahead. "Thanks for a great evening, Irene," Lucas said, his hand lingering on mine as he helped me into the passenger seat. The drive home was silent except for the hum of the engine. Simon didn't look at me, didn't speak, didn't even turn on the radio. When we pulled into our driveway, he finally broke the silence. "What you did back there was cruel." "It was a joke, Simon. Maybe if you had a sense of humor, you'd understand that." He turned off the engine and sat there for a moment. "A joke is supposed to be funny. What you did was humiliate me in front of your colleagues and tell them you'd rather sleep with your boss." "I didn't say I wanted to sleep with him. I said he'd probably be better at it. There's a difference." Simon looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but something colder, something calculating. "You're right, Irene. There is a difference, and now I know exactly where we stand." He got out of the car and walked into the house, leaving me sitting in the passenger seat, suddenly feeling very alone. The next few weeks passed in a haze of tension at home and excitement at work. Simon barely spoke to me except when necessary, and when he did, his tone was polite but distant. Like I was a stranger he was forced to be civil to. Instead of making me feel guilty, his coldness just reinforced my belief that I'd been right about him all along. Meanwhile, Lucas had started paying me even more attention at work. He'd stop by my desk with coffee in the mornings, ask my opinion on client matters, and invite me to longer lunch meetings. I told myself it was professional development, but the way he looked at me made my pulse quicken. "You seem different lately," he said one afternoon as we sat in his office, reviewing quarterly reports. "More confident. It suits you." "I've been thinking about what I want from life," I said, allowing my fingers to brush his as I handed him a file. "I'm tired of settling for mediocre. Smart woman. Life's too short to waste on people who don't appreciate what they have." His words felt like validation. Here was a successful, attractive man who saw my worth, unlike my husband who took me for granted. That evening, I came home to find Simon helping Mila with her homework at the kitchen table. Our daughter looked up when I walked in, her dark eyes, so much like her father's, studying my face. "How was work, Mom?" "Good, sweetheart. Very productive." I kissed the top of her head, inhaling the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "What are you working on?" "Math. Dad's helping me with fractions." I glanced at Simon, who continued working through the problems with Mila without acknowledging my presence. This had become his pattern, engaging with our daughter while essentially ignoring me. "Don't stay up too late," I said, heading toward the stairs. "I have some emails to catch up on." "It's 7:30, Simon said quietly. "She just started her homework." "I didn't realize you were tracking my parenting suggestions." Mila looked between us, her pencil frozen over her worksheet. I could see the confusion and worry in her expression, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered Lucas's words about not settling for mediocre, and the feeling passed. Upstairs in our bedroom, I opened my laptop and found a message from Lucas. "Dinner tomorrow? There's a new client I'd like to discuss with you." My heart raced as I typed back, "I'd love to. Where should we meet?" "Chez Laurent. 8 o'clock. Just the two of us. We can speak more freely." Chez Laurent was the most expensive French restaurant in town. I'd mentioned to Simon several times that I wanted to try it, but he always said it was too pricey for a teacher's salary. Now Lucas was taking me there for a business dinner. The next evening, I spent an hour getting ready, choosing a black dress that hugged my curves and made me feel sophisticated. When I came downstairs, Simon was loading the dishwasher while Mila watched TV in the living room. "I'll be late tonight," I announced. "Business dinner with Lucas." Simon paused in his dishwashing. "Another one?" "It's an important client. Lucas values my input." "I'm sure he does." There was something in his tone that made me defensive. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, Irene. Have a good dinner." His calm acceptance irritated me more than an argument would have. "You could at least pretend to be interested in my career advancement." "I am interested. I'm just wondering why these client dinners always seem to involve just you and Lucas." "Because I'm his administrative coordinator. Because he trusts me. Because some people actually value my contributions." Simon dried his hands on a dish towel, still maddeningly calm. "I never said I didn't value your contributions." "You don't have to say it. It's obvious in everything you do. When's the last time you took me somewhere nice? When's the last time you told me I looked beautiful? When's the last time you acted like you were proud to be married to me?" For a moment, something flickered in Simon's eyes. Hurt, maybe, or recognition. But then it was gone, replaced by that careful neutrality. "You look beautiful tonight, Irene. I hope you have a good time at dinner." His response deflated my anger, leaving me feeling strangely empty. I wanted him to fight with me, to show some passion, even if it was negative. Instead, he just turned back to the dishes. Dinner with Lucas was everything I'd been craving. He complimented my dress, ordered expensive wine, and made me feel like the most fascinating woman in the restaurant. We talked about work, but also about books, travel, dreams for the future. He listened intently to everything I said and responded with thoughtful questions. "You're wasted in that position," he said over dessert. "You should be running your own department, maybe your own agency." "Simon thinks I should be happy with what I have. He doesn't understand ambition." "That's the problem with some people. They're content with ordinary. But you're not ordinary, Irene. You deserve extraordinary." When he reached across the table and took my hand, I didn't pull away. His touch was warm, confident, electric in a way Simon's hadn't been for years. "I should go," I said, though I made no move to leave. "Should and want are two different things," Lucas said, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. I came home after 11 to find the house dark, except for the porch light Simon had left on. He was already in bed, either asleep or pretending to be. I slipped into the bathroom to wash off my makeup, catching sight of myself in the mirror. My cheeks were flushed, my eyes bright with excitement I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, Simon was already gone when I woke up. He'd left coffee made and Mila's lunch packed, but no note, no acknowledgement of my late night. His absence felt like an accusation. At work, I found a small bouquet of roses on my desk with a card. "Thank you for a wonderful evening. Looking forward to many more. L." I quickly hid the flowers in my desk drawer, but not before Jessica noticed. "Secret admirer?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Just a thank you from a grateful client," I lied. But throughout the day, I kept opening the drawer to look at the roses, feeling a thrill each time. When Lucas stopped by my desk around lunchtime, I felt my cheeks warm. "Did you get my gift?" "They're beautiful, but you shouldn't have. What if people get the wrong idea?" "What would be the wrong idea? That I appreciate excellent work?" His smile told me he knew exactly what idea people might get, and that he didn't care. The thought both thrilled and terrified me. That evening, Simon asked about my day over dinner, his tone carefully neutral. "Fine," Busy, the usual. Any interesting client meetings? I felt Mila's eyes on me and chose my words carefully. Nothing out of the ordinary. But Simon's gaze lingered on my face like he was reading something there I didn't want him to see. For the first time, I wondered if my husband was more perceptive than I'd given him credit for. 3 weeks later, I made a decision that would change everything. Cassandra, Simon's mother, had invited us for Sunday dinner, and on impulse, I asked Lucas to join us. "I'd love to meet your family," he said when I mentioned it at work. "It would be nice to put faces to the names you've told me about." I hadn't actually told him much about my family, but the idea of showing up with someone as impressive as Lucas was too tempting to resist. I imagined Cassandra's surprise, maybe even a hint of envy, when she met my sophisticated boss who clearly valued my company. I didn't tell Simon about inviting Lucas until we were getting ready to leave. "By the way, Lucas is joining us for dinner," I said casually, while applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. Simon stopped tying his shoes. "What?" "Lucas, man, my boss. He wanted to meet the family, and your mother always says the more the merrier. You invited your boss to my mother's house without asking me." I didn't realize I needed permission to invite a friend to dinner. "A friend?" Simon's voice had an edge I rarely heard. "Is that what we're calling him now?" "What else would we call him? He's my boss and my friend. Is that a problem?" Simon finished tying his shoes and stood up slowly. "No, Irene, no problem at all." But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was set. Good, I thought. Maybe a little competition would remind him what he had. We picked up Lucas at his downtown apartment, a sleek modern building that probably cost more per month than Simon made in 3. Lucas emerged wearing perfectly pressed slacks and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget. "Beautiful day for a family dinner," he said, sliding into the back seat of our Honda. If he noticed the car's worn interior or the juice box stains on the seat, he didn't show it. "My mother-in-law is an excellent cook," I said, turning to smile at him. "She's been making Sunday dinners for 30 years. I'm honored to be included." In the rearview mirror, I caught Simon's eyes. He was watching our interaction with that same careful neutrality, but I could sense something else underneath it. Cassandra's house was a modest 2-story in an older neighborhood, the kind of place where families had barbecues in the backyard and knew their neighbors' names. She answered the door wearing her favorite apron, her graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Simon, dear," she said, hugging her son. Then she turned to me with a polite smile. "Irene, and this must be your friend from work." "Lucas Mann," he said, extending his hand with that confident smile. "Mrs. Varel, thank you so much for including me. Your home is lovely." I watched Cassandra take in his expensive clothes, his perfect posture, his practiced charm. Her smile became a little more fixed. "Please, come in. Dale should be here any minute." Simon's younger brother arrived just as we were settling in the living room. Dale was 2 years younger than Simon, but looked older, with the weathered hands of someone who worked construction. He greeted Lucas politely, but I noticed the way his eyes moved between his brother and my boss, picking up on the tension that seemed to follow us. Over dinner, Lucas dominated the conversation effortlessly. He told amusing stories about the insurance business, complimented Cassandra's pot roast, and asked thoughtful questions about Dale's construction company. He was charming, engaging, everything a dinner guest should be, and I basked in the reflected glow of his sophistication. "Irene tells me you're a science teacher, Simon," Lucas said, cutting into his roast beef. "That must be rewarding, shaping young minds." "It has its moments," Simon replied quietly. "Of course, the pay probably isn't what you'd like. Teachers are so undervalued in this country." I saw Simon's fork pause halfway to his mouth. "The pay is adequate for our needs. Still, it must be frustrating, especially when you have a wife as talented as Irene. She could probably make more money than both of us if she put her mind to it." Irene is very capable, Simon said, his voice carefully controlled. I felt a flush of pleasure at Lucas's words. Finally, someone who recognized my potential. Maybe too capable for her current position, I said, emboldened by wine and attention. Some people think I should be content with what I have, but Lucas believes in pushing boundaries. Ambition is important, Lucas agreed. Life's too short to settle for less than you deserve. Across the table, I saw Cassandra's eyes narrow slightly. Dale was studying his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Only Mila seemed oblivious to the undercurrents, chattering about her school play between bites of mashed potatoes. After dinner, while Cassandra and I cleared the dishes, she made her first direct comment about Lucas. He seems very polished. He's successful, I said, stacking plates perhaps more forcefully than necessary. He knows how to make people feel appreciated. I'm sure he does. Something in her tone made me defensive. Is there a problem? Not at all, dear. I just hope you know what you're doing. Before I could ask what she meant, Lucas appeared in the kitchen doorway. Can I help with anything? I hate to see beautiful women doing all the work. Cassandra's smile could have cut glass. How thoughtful, but we're nearly finished. As we prepared to leave, Lucas shook hands with everyone again, thanking Cassandra profusely for her hospitality. But I noticed Simon barely spoke during the goodbyes, and Dale's farewell was distinctly cool. In the car, the silence was deafening. Lucas filled it with commentary about the lovely evening and what a nice family I had, but Simon said nothing until we dropped Lucas off at his apartment. Thank you again for including me, Lucas said, leaning down to the passenger window. We should do this again soon. After he disappeared into his building, Simon and I sat in the car for a moment. Mila had fallen asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the long day. Well, I said finally, what did you think? Simon started the engine. I think you made your point. What point? That you can do better than a high school science teacher. His words stung because they were exactly what I'd been thinking. I never said that. You didn't have to. It was written all over your face every time you looked at him. I wanted to deny it, but something in Simon's voice stopped me. He sounded tired, defeated in a way that made me feel both guilty and frustrated. Maybe if you made more of an effort, I said quietly. Maybe I should. But when I looked at him, I saw something in his expression that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't the hurt I'd expected, or even anger. It was something calculating, like he was working through a problem in his head. The next morning, I woke to find Simon already gone, and a note on the kitchen counter. Taking Mila to school. We'll be late tonight. Don't wait up. It was the beginning of a new pattern. Simon became even more distant, but in a different way. Instead of the wounded silence I'd grown used to, he seemed to be watching, waiting, planning something. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I began to feel a flutter of unease. The first sign that things were unraveling came on a Thursday morning when Mila's teacher, Mrs. Henderson, called me at work. Mrs. Verall, I'm concerned about Mila. Her grades have been slipping, and she seems distracted in class. Yesterday she fell asleep during reading time, which isn't like her at all. I felt a stab of guilt. Has she said anything about what might be bothering her? Not directly, but she did mention that you and her father have been arguing a lot. She seems quite anxious about it. After I hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen, trying to process the call. I'd been so focused on my own happiness that I hadn't noticed how the tension at home was affecting our daughter. Everything okay? Lucas appeared at my desk with his usual morning coffee. Mila's teacher called. She's having some problems at school. Kids are resilient, he said, perching on the edge of my desk in a way that would have seemed inappropriate if anyone was paying attention. She'll adjust. Adjust to what? To whatever changes are coming. His hand briefly covered mine. Sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. I pulled my hand away, suddenly uncomfortable with his casual assumption that changes were inevitable. I should probably go home early today, spend some time with her. Of course, family first. But I caught a flash of annoyance in his eyes before he smiled. That evening, I found Simon in his study, grading papers with the methodical precision he brought to everything. I knocked on the doorframe. "Can we talk?" He looked up, his expression neutral. "What about?" "Mila, her teacher called today." Something shifted in Simon's face. "What did she say?" I explained the conversation, watching as Simon's jaw tightened with each detail. "She's been having nightmares too," he said quietly. "She comes to my side of the bed around 3 in the morning. Says she can't sleep." "Why didn't you tell me?" "When would I tell you? You're either at work, at dinner with your boss, or locked in the bedroom on your laptop." The accusation hit home because it was true. "I've been busy with work. Is that what we're calling it?" I felt my defenses rise. "What's that supposed to mean?" Simon set down his red pen and looked at me directly. "It means I'm not blind, Irene. It means I've been watching you lie to me for weeks, and now our daughter is suffering for it." "I haven't lied about anything." "Haven't you?" He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small notebook. "Tuesday, March 15th. You said you had a client dinner until 9:30. I called the restaurant at 10. They said you'd left an hour earlier." My blood turned cold. "You checked up on me?" "Wednesday, March 22nd. You said Lucas was taking the whole team out for drinks. Jessica posted on Facebook that she was home making dinner with her family." He flipped through more pages, each one apparently documenting my lies and inconsistencies. When had my quiet, unobservant husband become so methodical? "You're spying on me. I'm protecting my daughter and myself. From what? From whatever you're planning to do to this family." I wanted to deny everything, to accuse him of paranoia and jealousy. But looking at that notebook, seeing the careful documentation of my deceptions, I realized how much evidence I'd left behind. "I don't know what you think is happening. I think you're having an affair with your boss. I think you've been lying to me for months. And I think you're planning to leave us for him." The words hung in the air between us. I could have denied it, could have turned it around and accused him of not trusting me. Instead, I found myself saying, "And what if I am?" Simon's face went very still. "Then I guess we both know where we stand." He closed the notebook and put it back in the drawer. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. We'll figure out the rest later." As he walked past me toward the door, I grabbed his arm. "Simon, wait. We can work this out." He looked down at my hand on his arm, then back at my face. "Can we? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've already made your choice." After he left, I sat in his study chair, staring at the closed drawer that contained his notebook. How long had he been documenting my activities? What else did he know? I pulled out my phone and texted Lucas. "We need to be more careful. Simon is suspicious." His response came back quickly. "Don't worry about Simon. Focus on what you want." But I was worried about Simon. The man I'd married was quiet and predictable, not someone who kept surveillance notebooks or spoke with the cold calculation I'd heard in his voice tonight. The next few days passed in a tense stalemate. Simon was polite but distant, interacting with me only when necessary for Mila's sake. He picked up our daughter from school every day, helped with homework, and put her to bed while I worked late or attended business dinners with Lucas. At the office, rumors were starting to circulate. I caught whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by, noticed the way some colleagues avoided eye contact. Jessica, who had been friendly before, now seemed uncomfortable around me. "People are talking," she said one afternoon when I cornered her in the break room. "About what?" "You and Lucas. The long lunches, the after-hours meetings. It's pretty obvious what's going on. We're working on a big project." Jessica gave me a look that said she wasn't buying it. "Irene, be careful. Office affairs never end well for the woman." But I was past the point of being careful. Lucas and I had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. The emotional affair had become physical, and I was intoxicated by the passion and excitement I'd been missing for years. When Simon confronted me again the following week, I was ready for him. "I want you to stop seeing him," he said as I got ready for another dinner with Lucas. "I can't stop seeing him. He's my boss." "You know what I mean." I turned to face him, decision crystallizing in my mind. What if I don't want to stop? Then I'll file for divorce and seek full custody of Mila. The threat should have scared me, but instead it made me angry. On what grounds? Adultery, abandonment. I've been documenting everything, Irene. Your lies, your absences, your neglect of our daughter. You can't prove anything. Simon's smile was cold and unfamiliar. Can't I? He left me standing in our bedroom, my hands shaking as I applied lipstick. For the first time, I wondered if I'd underestimated my quiet, methodical husband, and I wondered if it was already too late to fix what I'd broken. The beginning of the end came on a Monday morning, when I walked into the office to find Lucas's door closed and voices raised behind it. Through the frosted glass, I could see two figures, Lucas and someone I didn't recognize in a dark suit. "Irene," Jessica whispered, appearing at my elbow. "HR is here. They've been in there for an hour." My stomach dropped. HR? Why? Someone filed a complaint about inappropriate workplace relationships. They're auditing expense reports and interviewing people about your friendship with Lucas. I sank into my desk chair, my mind racing. Who could have reported us? We'd been discreet, professional in public. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true. The long lunches, the expensive dinners, the flowers, the way Lucas touched my shoulder or lingered by my desk, it had all been noticed. My phone buzzed with a text from Simon. "Mila has a parent-teacher conference today at 3 p.m. Can you make it?" I stared at the message, realizing I'd completely forgotten about the conference. Between work and my relationship with Lucas, I'd been neglecting everything else. "I'll try," I texted back, though I wasn't sure I could leave with HR investigating. At 10:30, Lucas emerged from his office looking rattled. The man in the suit, presumably from HR, shook his hand and left without acknowledging anyone else. "My office," Lucas said quietly as he passed my desk. Inside, he closed the door and ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "What did they want?" I asked. "Someone reported our relationship. They're investigating whether company resources were used for personal expenses." "What does that mean?" "It means they're looking at every dinner, every lunch, every expense report we've submitted. They want to know if we've been using company money for dates." I felt sick. "Have we?" Lucas's silence was answer enough. "They want to interview you this afternoon," he said. "Just be honest, but don't volunteer information they don't ask for." "What about us? What about everything we've talked about?" For the first time since I'd known him, Lucas looked uncomfortable. "Let's get through this first. See what happens." The HR interview was a nightmare. The investigator, a stern woman named Patricia Webb, asked detailed questions about my relationship with Lucas, our dinner meetings, and the expense reports. She had printouts of restaurant bills, copies of hotel receipts I didn't even know existed, and a timeline of our activities that was frighteningly thorough. "Mrs. Verrell, did you and Mr. Mann ever engage in personal activities during company time?" "We sometimes discussed work over dinner. At Le Bernardin, at Chez Laurent. These are very expensive restaurants for business dinners. Lucas believed in treating clients well. What clients were present at these dinners?" I couldn't answer because there had been no clients. It was just us, every time. By the time the interview ended, I was shaking. I'd managed to avoid outright lies, but I knew my evasions hadn't fooled anyone. I rushed to Mila's school, arriving 20 minutes late for the parent-teacher conference. Simon was already there, sitting across from Mrs. Henderson with a grim expression. "Mrs. Verrell, thank you for joining us," the teacher said with professional courtesy that couldn't hide her disapproval of my tardiness. "I'm sorry I'm late. Work crisis." Simon didn't look at me as I took the seat beside him. I was just explaining to your husband that Mila's academic performance has declined significantly over the past month. Her attention span is poor, she's tired in class, and she's become withdrawn from her classmates. What can we do to help? Simon asked. Stability at home would be a good start. Children Mila's age are very sensitive to family stress. She's mentioned that you and her mother have been arguing. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. We're going through a difficult patch, but we're working on it. Mrs. Henderson's expression suggested she'd heard that before. I'd recommend family counseling, and perhaps limiting Mila's exposure to adult conflicts. After the conference, Simon and I walked to our cars in silence. Finally, he spoke. How was your work crisis? What do you mean? The one that made you 20 minutes late for our daughter's conference. I could have lied, made up some story about a demanding client. Instead, I found myself telling him the truth. HR is investigating my relationship with Lucas. Someone reported us. Simon stopped walking. Someone reported you for what? For having an inappropriate workplace relationship, for using company money for personal dinners. For a long moment, Simon just stared at me. Then he started laughing, a bitter sound I'd never heard from him before. You're going to lose your job. I might lose my job. And Lucas, what's he going to do to protect you? I thought about Lucas's uncomfortable demeanor, his suggestion that we see what happens before making any decisions about our future. He's going to stand by me. Is he? Because from what I've seen, Lucas is the type of man who protects himself first. That evening, I tried calling Lucas but got his voicemail. I texted him, but he didn't respond. When I drove by his apartment building, his car wasn't in its usual spot. For the first time since this all began, I felt truly alone. The next morning, I arrived at work to find a memo on my desk requesting my presence in HR at 9 a.m. When I got there, Patricia Webb was waiting with a folder thick with documents. Mrs. Verall, after reviewing the evidence, we've determined that company policy was violated regarding personal relationships between supervisors and subordinates, as well as misuse of company funds. What does that mean? It means you're being placed on unpaid administrative leave pending the outcome of our investigation. You'll need to clean out your desk and surrender your company credit card and building access. What about Lucas? Mr. Mann's situation is being handled separately. I wanted to ask what that meant, but Patricia's expression made it clear the conversation was over. Back at my desk, I packed my personal items while my colleagues pretended not to watch. Jessica helped me carry boxes to my car, her face full of sympathy. What will you do now? She asked. I don't know. Have you talked to Lucas? He's not returning my calls. Jessica's expression told me everything I needed to know about what she thought of that. At home, I found Simon in the kitchen making Mila's lunch for school. He looked up when I walked in with my boxes. Let me guess, they fired you. Administrative leave. Same thing. He went back to making the sandwich. What about your boss? I don't know. They wouldn't tell me. Want my guess? He'll get a reprimand and keep his job. You'll be the one who pays the price. I wanted to argue with him, to defend Lucas and insist that he would fight for me, but I'd been trying to reach him for 2 days without success. I need to figure out what to do next. Simon looked at me then, and I saw something like pity in his eyes. You could start by thinking about our daughter. She's failing school because her mother decided to blow up her family for a man who won't even return her phone calls. His words hit like physical blows because they were true. I had destroyed my job, my marriage, and my daughter's security for a man who had disappeared the moment things got difficult. That afternoon, I finally reached Lucas. His voice was cool, professional. Irene, I can't talk long. Things are complicated right now. When can I see you? We need to discuss what happens next. I think we should keep our distance for a while, let things cool down. Keep our distance. Lucas, we talked about a future together. I know, but that was before all this. I have to think about my career, my reputation. What about me? What about everything you said about deserving better? You do deserve better, but I can't be the one to give it to you. Not now. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. I'd lost my job, my marriage, and now the man I'd sacrificed everything for was abandoning me. For the first time in months, I had no idea what came next. The divorce papers came on a Tuesday, handed to me by a process server who looked more sorry than I deserved. Inside was the clean, cold outline of my new life. Simon wanted full custody of Mila, the house, most of our assets, and child support. There was a restraining order keeping me from taking her out of state and limiting me to supervised visitation until the hearing. When I called his lawyer, she didn't sugarcoat it. My affair, lies, job loss, and neglect had created an unsafe, unstable environment, and if I wanted any chance at a real role in Mila's life again, I'd need counseling, parenting classes, stable work, and proof I could put her first. For the first time, I stopped defending myself out loud. I'd grown up with a mother who blamed everyone else for everything. My father leaving, money troubles, every disappointment, and I realized I'd copied that pattern. But this wasn't one mistake. I'd had an affair, lied constantly, missed school events, and lost my job because I treated my marriage like a cage and myself like the victim. Simon, meanwhile, had quietly been documenting everything: texts and calls with Lucas, hotel and restaurant charges, school reports showing Mila's grades and attendance sliding, social media posts that proved where I really was when I claimed I was at work. In court, his lawyer walked the judge through my betrayal like a crime scene. When it was my turn, I didn't try to spin it. I admitted I'd made terrible choices and that I wanted a chance to earn back my place in Mila's life, not as a reward, but as a responsibility. It wasn't enough to avoid consequences. Simon spoke last, explaining Mila's nightmares and anxiety, and asked not to punish me, but to protect our daughter. The judge gave him primary custody and me supervised visits twice a week, with the possibility of review in a year if I proved I'd changed. I left the courtroom humiliated, but unable to claim I'd been treated unfairly. 6 months later, I was in a tiny apartment, working as a receptionist, seeing Mila under supervision, and slowly, painfully showing her I would keep showing up. Lucas kept his job, took a bit of mandatory training, paid back some funds, and moved on to a younger, complication-free woman. I became a cliché I'd once mocked, the office affair that ruined the woman's life and barely touched the man's. But a year after the hearing, with steady work, completed counseling, and a perfect visitation record, I asked the court for unsupervised visits. Simon didn't fight it. Sitting with him in a coffee shop, finalizing the new arrangement, I apologized for everything. He forgave me, but reminded me forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. I didn't get my marriage back, and I never will. But I did get something else. A chance to rebuild my relationship with my daughter, and to finally see my own patterns clearly. I'd traded a stable, imperfect, loving life for 6 months of excitement and ego, and lost almost everything that mattered. The only thing I can do now is make sure that loss teaches me something real, about what love actually is, what responsibility really means, and how not to pass my damage on to the person who least deserves it, my child.